Today's video has been sponsored by Bombas. The other day, I was taking a trip down memory lane throughout all the videos of my channel, and I realized we've basically abandoned one of my favorite series. Those YouTube versus TikTok videos, from the bagel breakfast sandwich, the Korean beef bulgogi, even those double cheeseburgers. Come to think of it, that is around the time I began to have some questionable blood tests, so maybe that was a subconscious reason. Either way, I think it's time to bring it back with a food, specifically a sandwich, I have been dying to tackle on the channel for the longest time. Teaming up to defend the honor of us supposedly old and cringy and geriatric Team YouTube is going to be Brian Lagerstrome and Sam the Cooking Guy. And then the challengers coming together for Team TikTok will be Alvaro Ramirez on the bread station and cooking in the Midwest with his Crockpot French dips. Whose French dip will reign? Soup cheese? Awful. I'm sorry. Let's get right into this one. If I'm not mistaken, Team YouTube is 4-0. I think they're undefeated, and realistically it doesn't matter who I pick, it's gonna piss off a bunch of people regardless. But I think one thing we can agree to, and all get behind, is the incredible mission from the good people over at Bombas. Just over a decade ago now, the founders over at Bombas learned that socks are the #1 most requested clothing item at homeless shelters. As a result, they not only set out to solve that problem, but also happened to create the world's most comfortable sock in the process. And honestly, there's just too many reasons why I love these things to list them all, but I'll give it a go. I love the colors and the designs. I love the built-in arch supports, the lack of those annoying toe seams up front. I've been wearing these things every single day. They're like my favorite socks. I was gonna avoid giving you foot angles again, but just to prove the point, I've ran 5Ks in these things and played tennis in them all the time, and they're still holding up just as good as the first day I've gotten them. But still, my favorite part of Bombas is that with your purchase, you feel amazing in more ways than one, because with every item purchased means another one donated. And after just over a decade now, they've donated over 100 million items, which is incredible. And you can't forget about their 100% happiness guarantee. Whether you get a hole-in-one, or if Nala got a hold of one, they offer free returns and exchanges. So feel good and do good with Bombas by going to bombas.com/David or clicking that link in the top line of the description, using my code David20 at checkout, and new customers will get 20% off of their first purchase. I feel like in each one of these videos so far, I've made Team TikTok go first, so YouTube, why don't you start us off today? I grabbed some bread flour and sugar, kosher salt, olive oil, some active dry yeast, and water. If you couldn't tell, these are just the ingredients for Brian Lagerstrome's hoagie rolls. I also think this is the first recipe of his I have done on the channel, so welcome. And I was very happy to see how simple this recipe was. There's no added amylase enzymes or dough conditioners or guar gums or craziness. This is a very simple, straightforward bread recipe. The whole thing comes together in the stand mixer. It rises once in its bulk form. It rises a second time once you've got them divided in half and rolled into taut little balls. And then a third time once your final sub-roll shape is achieved. And of course it's baked off. What do you call this type of sandwich or bread, by the way? I know it's highly regional. I have heard sub-rolls, hoagies. Where I live, we call them wedges, which I thought was the norm for the majority of my life. It sounds so normal, it rolls off the tongue. Let me get a chicken parm wedge. Maybe not so much, actually, but either way, let me know what you call them down in the comments. This version of them was looking fantastic. And the rest of the ingredients you're gonna need to complete YouTube's French dip sandwich are vermouth and Westchester sauce, horseradish sauce and butter, beef stock concentrate, Coleman's mustard, a ribeye steak, Montreal steak seasoning, an onion, salt and pepper, fresh thyme, and our freshly baked wedge roll. I know what you're thinking. We just went over a year without doing a Sam the Cooking Guy recipe, and now it's back-to-back videos. What gives? For one thing, this French dip video of his looks so good. Every time it pops in my suggested, I watch it. It's probably been 7 or 8 times now. It definitely had nothing to do with him finally answering my business question from 5 years ago and adding in a little potential collab idea at the end there, which I will keep you all updated with. For this, I whipped up some of the beef stock from that concentrate base, zhuzhed it up a little bit with the Worcestershire, the fresh thyme, and the vermouth, and right next to that, I thinly sliced some onions, allowed those to caramelize up. Anytime they got too dry, just splashed in some of that stock, and I let those finish over very low heat while I attended my bread and steak. Don't get me wrong, the final sandwich Sam makes looks incredible. That thumbnail is just But there's a few technical things that surprised me and feels like it's out of his character. The Montreal steak seasoning being one of them. I feel like I've never seen him use this before. But maybe it's gonna work some kind of magic in this because it was smelling incredible on the grill. I got it sliced up nice and thin. And as I topped this off and was about to bring it down here to taste test it, oh, you moron. Let's not forget what I just spent an hour caramelizing these onions, but this thing is looking pretty damn good. Of course, I didn't add a little bit more sauce and onions on the edge to make it even more appetizing to the camera. I would never do that. Oh man, sell these bad boys. They already do. This thing's freaking good, man. It is so salty, savory. That ribeye is super tender. I love the horseradish sauce on there. I feel like I've seen that in a lot of pub-style steak sandwiches. And besides the fact that the bottom of the bread is saturated, because I spilled the au jus everywhere, the bread overall is a little underwhelming. It's fine. I mean, it works for its intended purpose, but I just feel like it's kind of bland. A lot of other sandwiches, the bread kind of shines, whereas this one falls to the back a bit. Really, really solid though. I would be thrilled with this at any restaurant, but I do think this video might get a little bit interesting. In the black and red corner, we've got an equally strong team up of contenders. And once again, Alvaro and his bread are tapping in the ring first. I grabbed some bread flour and salt, sugar, butter, malted milk powder and water, and egg and some instant yeast. Once again, a very simple and comparable recipe to the first one. Maybe the malted milk powder might be hard to come by, but I have seen it in more and more stores, so it's not that much of a specialty ingredient. Also, the procedure of this one is very simple too. I started by blooming my yeast first in some 100-degree Fahrenheit water with the sugar, and then added that into my stand mixer with everything else, leaving the butter for last, so we can add that in 1 tablespoon at a time, make sure it gets nice and emulsified. We're gonna use the same proofing times and methods, basically the same rolling technique, except for one potentially crucial step. I've never seen anybody else do this, but he basically smears the edge of the bread dough right into the board. I suppose that is to act as an anchor, so you can pull this really nice and taut into a very tight roll, and then it acts almost as an adhesive, so when you fold it over to the end, it sticks to itself. Very useful, seemingly, so I will try not to forget that one in the future. And then these deviate quite a bit from the first loaves. We split them into 4 rather than 2, so they're gonna be a little bit smaller. They're gonna get egg washed, so that should allow them to have a very nice, shiny, golden sheen. And then they're gonna get some crosswise Subway-esque slits. I actually sent a photo of these to Steven because he worked at Subway way back when, and he said it gave him PTSD. That does beg the question why he's never made me a sandwich before, but I will address that later. And picking it up from here is going to be cooking in the Midwest with his Crockpot French dip sandwiches. And the components you need for that is some garlic powder, Worcestershire sauce and beef stock, butter, provolone cheese, and a big old chuck steak, some beer and an au jus packet, salt and pepper, garlic, onions, and of course our rolls. Obviously, this is now where Team Tikok is taking a completely different turn with their iteration. Rather than a grilled ribeye, we're gonna attempt to get a nice sear on the chuck roast after it was heavily seasoned and pat dry. And then right down in that pan to pick up all those good fondy bits, we're gonna add everything else. The beer, the au jus, the onions, the garlic. This recipe screams like something I would do on my own time. I love braising cheaper cuts of beef. It almost guarantees you're gonna have a tender and flavorful end product. But you add that extra little something with the hard sear on the outside of it, making sure you're losing none of the flavor by deglazing with the beer, and then just forgetting about it. Down in your crock pot, he suggests 6 to 8 hours on low heat. I think I did 4 on high. The 8 hours would be perfect if you were headed off to work in the morning, but we here are on a bit of a time crunch. And afterwards, my God, this thing was like, it just goes to show that you don't always have to use those expensive short ribs to get that fall off the bone, gorgeous tender beef. You can use something like this. I think it was maybe 20 bucks for over 3 pounds. And then mixed back with that meat and thrown in my freshly baked bread with plenty of provolone cheese. I'm not one to jump the gun and crown anybody anything before they prove themselves, but all I'm saying is that YouTube's undefeated stretch may be a bit in jeopardy. How the roles have shifted. Well, they win. Good night, everyone. I'm not exaggerating when I say that this is better in every measurable way. The bread is better, the meat is better, I like cheese. I'm really surprised that Sam didn't add any cheese to his, and I didn't realize until now, but I do think that was missing. The onion flavor in this is still present. The bread, I'm sorry, but it's like infinitely better. It's got more flavor, it's fluffier, honestly it looks better. You don't have to be an expert griller and worry about botching the cooking of that really expensive ribeye. And this chuck roast is a lot cheaper. And it's just a tender and picks up just as much flavor, so these win maybe in the biggest landslide out of any of these videos. Good job, TikTok. I'm genuinely proud of you.
With the M without the AD. Flipping burgers and my money super lazy. Try and make a meal tonight, they ain't paying me. Try and supersize my life with my 18. Yeah, our style wasn't wavy, but we had a vision.